Every ghost town has an explanation, but in Oklahoma, some of those explanations sound more unbelievable than any ghost story. In this video, I'm taking you through 10 towns that disappeared in 10 completely different ways. One dies because the highway keeps moving but never stops. Another dies because the railroad made one choice and never looked back. And another dies because the law changed in a single season. One town gets wiped off the map by floods, leaving not even a single wall behind. One community is swallowed by a man-made lake, leaving a cemetery island floating in the middle of the water. And there's one town people didn't abandon because they were broke, but because staying became too dangerous. Stick around to the end because number 1 will show you a ghost town that isn't ancient history. It's a consequence that's still alive today. Number 10, Texola, Beckham County. Texola is the kind of place that makes you do a double take, because it sits right on the edge of Oklahoma, almost kissing the Texas line. And I mean that literally. Folks around here like to joke that if the border ever got measured again, half the town might wake up in a different state without moving a single chair. The first thing that grabs you isn't a skyline. It's a sentence painted big on an old bar building. There is no place like Texola. And it hits different when the streets are quiet. It feels less like a slogan and more like a dare. Like, go ahead, prove me wrong. Now here's the weird little punchline. Texola has a jail, not a jail complex, not a station, a tiny one-room jail, built back in 1908, used only for a short stretch, and today you can still see it in daylight like it's just sitting there, waiting for someone to remember why it exists. It's small enough to feel like a closet with bars, and standing near it makes you wonder what kind of trouble even happened in a town this size. And yes, Texola really was a town once. It popped up in the early 1900s when the railroad came through and a post office opened. Cotton and farm business kept it alive. By the 1930s, this place had real momentum. Cotton gins, churches, hotels, restaurants, a park, even an auditorium with a few hundred seats. At one point, around 600 people lived here. That's not a rumor, that's a community. Then the road got faster. Route 66 didn't just bring travelers, it brought money. And Texola learned to survive off the little emergencies of the highway, flat tires, stuck cars, mud. The Magnolia service station, built around 1930, sat on the old route before this stretch was even fully paved. Back then, they didn't just sell gas. They sold tires, chains, and the kind of help you needed when your trip went sideways. Today, the station is vacant. The canopy still stands. The building still looks friendly. But it's like a smile nobody answers anymore. These days, Texola is down to just a few dozen residents. It's not a ghost town in the classic everyone vanished overnight way. It's a slow fade, a place the modern highway learned to ignore. And if Texola feels like it died because the road stopped needing it. The next town on our list was left behind by something even colder. The railroad chose a different path. Number 9, Skullyville, Flore County. Skullyville sounds like the kind of place you'd find in a horror movie, right? Like somebody named it after a pile of bones and just went with it. But here's the twist. The name actually comes from a Choctaw word that means money. Not skulls, money. And once you know that, the whole town makes more sense. Back in the 1830s, Skullyville wasn't some random dot in the woods. It sat about 3 miles east of what we call Spiro today, and it grew up around the Choctaw Agency that opened in 1832. This was the place where annuity payments were handed out, which meant when payment day came, people showed up. Traders showed up too. If you were selling supplies, food, tools, or anything a traveling crowd might need, this was the spot. It also wasn't just business. Skullyville had real weight in the Choctaw Nation. For a period, it served as the national capital. And in 1857, the Choctaw Constitution was drafted here. Think about that for a second. A town that basically started as a money pickup point ended up shaping politics and law. Then you get another layer that feels straight out of an old American road story. Skullyville sat on the California Road, and it became a stop for the Butterfield Overland Mail back when cross-country meant dust, horses, and days of hard travel. Nearby, the Butterfield station was tied to Tandy Walker, a Choctaw governor, and the land still carries that history even if the buildings don't. But here's where Skullyville turns into a ghost town in the coldest way possible. The railroad just didn't pick it. In 1895, the Kansas City Southern Line bypassed Skullyville, and business owners moved closer to the depot over in Spiro. The town didn't explode. It didn't burn down overnight. It just got quietly unplugged. And by 1917, even the post office was done. So what's left today? Mostly silence and a cemetery. Skullyville Cemetery is the big remaining landmark, with hundreds, maybe even thousands of graves, and many are unmarked. Some markers go back to the 1830s. It's the kind of place where the ground feels heavy, like the town didn't disappear, it just sank into the dirt. And if you want one last weird detail to stick with you, there's also an old Stone County jail in the area. Thick walls, iron door, basically a tiny rock box, sitting on private land like a leftover warning sign from another century. Skullyville wasn't killed by a disaster, it was killed by a decision. One rail line choosing a different stop, and the next town on our list, it vanishes for a completely different reason. One that doesn't involve tracks at all. Number 8, Parkersburg, Custer County. Most ghost towns die the same way. The jobs leave, the kids leave, the stores shut down, and the place just slowly empties out. Parkersburg is not that kind of ghost town. Parkersburg is the town that basically packed a suitcase and moved. Well, back in the early days, Parkersburg was a real little Oklahoma town, sitting just a few miles from where Clinton is today. People lived there, worked there, ran businesses there. It had momentum. At one point, you'll see estimates putting the population around 700, which doesn't sound huge, but out here, that's enough to feel like a community. Enough that you'd expect it to hang on. Then something happened that sounds boring on paper, but it was a death sentence in real life. The railroads made their choice. Clinton became the place where 2 railroad lines crossed. And when that happens, it's like the entire region gets a new center of gravity. Freight, travelers, mail, money, it all starts flowing to the intersection. Parkersburg wasn't on the winning side of that map anymore. And here's the part that makes Parkersburg almost unbelievable. Instead of fading away slowly, people started relocating the town itself. Not just a family here and there, buildings, businesses, whole chunks of Parkersburg were physically moved to Clinton. One account even says around 100 buildings were hauled off, like the town got stripped down piece by piece. Imagine watching your neighbor's store get loaded up and dragged away and realizing, okay, this place isn't coming back. It gets even weirder. The railroad depot didn't stay either. It was moved to Keokuk. So Parkersburg lost its people, then lost its purpose, and even the train station basically said, yeah, I'm out. Today, Parkersburg doesn't give you the classic ghost town look with a row of collapsing storefronts. That's the whole point. The town didn't crumble. It relocated. What you can still visit is the Parkersburg Cemetery. It sits up on higher ground, and from there you're looking out over what used to be the town site. And if you listen closely, you can hear the present-day world rushing by, because you can even catch the sound of traffic from I-40 down in the valley. That contrast is what makes Parkersburg creepy in a quiet way. Below you, everything is moving fast. Above you, the cemetery is still. It's like you're standing in the last place that refused to move when the rest of the town picked up and left. And if you think that's a strange ending, the next place on our list didn't move at all. It got erased for a totally different reason. Number 7, Keokuk Falls, Pottawatomie County. Keokuk Falls is one of those names that sounds like it should come with a warning label. Like you're about to pull off the highway and find a creepy waterfall, a broken bridge, and a story nobody wants to tell. Here's the first twist. The falls part isn't even the main reason this town existed. Keokuk Falls was basically a town built on a loophole. In the 1890s, this area opened up after the Sac and Fox reservation lands were made available and people poured in looking for opportunity. But Keokuk Falls didn't boom because of oil or gold. It boomed because of something simpler and way more controversial: liquor. This spot sat in the perfect position near the line between dry territory and wet territory. So if you were living on the wrong side of the rules, Keokuk Falls was where you came to get what you couldn't legally get at home. And the town leaned into it hard. At its peak, it had not one but two distilleries and more saloons than you'd expect for a place most people today have never even heard of. And it wasn't just a couple shacks and a bar. Old photos and local records talk about a real main street, a post office, a hotel, a store, a drugstore, even a Masonic temple upstairs in one of the buildings. That's the part that always hits me, because it means families lived here. People weren't just passing through. They were building a whole little world, on top of a business that depended on the rules staying exactly the way they were, and then Oklahoma became a state in 1907. When Oklahoma entered the Union, it came in as a dry state, and once the law changed, the loophole slammed shut. The thing that fed Keokuk Falls got cut off at the root. No slow decline, no dramatic final battle. Just a town that didn't make sense anymore. So what does Keokuk Falls look like today? This isn't the kind of ghost town where you'll find a row of collapsing storefronts. The best proof is quieter. The townsite area traces in the landscape and the Keokuk Cemetery nearby. And here's the part that feels almost too perfect for a ghost town story. One official historical marker for Keokuk Falls has been reported missing. Like even the sign that's supposed to remember the town disappeared. And the waterfall? A lot of people say it's not something you really see clearly anymore. Time, water levels, and a changing river can erase a falls, the same way laws erased a whiskey town. Keokuk Falls didn't get destroyed by a tornado or flooded under a lake. It got outlawed. In the next town on our list, that one didn't get shut down by a law. It got taken out by something you can't argue with: nature. Number 6, Pine Valley, Southeastern Oklahoma. If you ever want proof that a town can be built like a product, Pine Valley is it. Picture this. Deep in the woods, tucked into the Kiamichi River Valley, there was once a place with a 72-room hotel, not a lodge, not a couple cabins, a real hotel out there, in the middle of what looks like nowhere. That's because Pine Valley wasn't born the normal way. It didn't slowly grow around a crossroads or a courthouse. Pine Valley was a company town, built in the 1920s when a lumber company decided the forest wasn't just trees. It was a whole economy waiting to happen. They carved a town out of the valley between the Kiamichi Mountains and the Winding Stair Mountains, and then they connected it to the outside world with a railroad line that ran up to Page, where it could link into bigger routes. And for a while, it worked. Big time. Pine Valley had the kind of stuff that makes you forget you're talking about a logging town, a commissary store, a barbershop, a post office, a doctor, a drugstore, a school, even an ice plant. There was a movie house too. And here's one of my favorite details. On Sundays, that same movie house would turn into a church. One room, two completely different lives depending on the day. At its peak, there were around 300 houses and roughly 1,500 people, living there on average during its busiest stretch with about 800 workers feeding the mill and the logging operation. It ran like a machine. And like a lot of towns from that era, it had a segregated section for black workers, which tells you something important. This wasn't just a work camp. It was a full community with all the reality and contradictions that come with one. Then the forest started to run out. By the early 1940s, the easy timber was getting scarce. The company began shutting the town down around 1941. The railroad was abandoned soon after, and the mill closed. And this is what makes Pine Valley feel so eerie compared to other ghost towns. It didn't just get abandoned, it got dismantled. piece by piece, the tracks and most of the buildings were hauled away. By the 1950s, so much of Pine Valley had been removed that it's like someone struck the set after the movie wrapped. Today, the area is tied to the place known as Muse, and if you go looking for Pine Valley, you're mostly looking for hints. The lay of the land, the ghosts of old routes, and the cemetery that quietly proves people really did live, laugh, work, and build a life out here. Pine Valley didn't collapse. It got packed up. And the next town on our list, that one wasn't taken apart, it was swallowed whole. Number 5, Sardis, Southeastern Oklahoma. If you didn't know the story, you'd think someone made it up for the internet, because out on Sardis Lake, there's a tiny island that looks completely normal from a distance, until you realize it's covered in headstones, not trees, not cabins. Headstones, like the lake is holding on to the last thing it couldn't swallow. That little island is just what's left of Sardis. Sardis used to be a real community up here in southeastern Oklahoma, in the north part of Pushmataha County near Clayton. People lived there, raised families, buried their relatives, and did all the everyday stuff towns do. And then the town didn't decline. It didn't lose the railroad. It didn't run out of timber. It got erased by a project. Sardis Lake is a man-made lake on Jack Fork Creek, built for flood control, water supply, and recreation. Construction started in 1975. By the early 1980s, the project was basically ready. And in 1983, the lake began filling for real. That's the moment everything changed, because when a reservoir fills, it doesn't just cover land. It covers routines, roads, front porches, and the kind of small history you can't replace. And here's where it gets heavy. As the lake took shape, parts of the old Sardis area went under. Some graves were moved when the project was happening, but not all of them. Locals in reporting about the area say some remains still lie beneath the water, which means when you're out there fishing or boating on a bright summer day, you might be drifting above a place where people once walked to school, visited neighbors, and sat down for dinner. The cemetery is the one thing you can still read with your eyes. There are old markers, handmade-looking stones, and even graves labeled unknown. It's quiet, and it doesn't feel like a spooky haunted house kind of eerie. It feels like a receipt, like proof that a whole town was here, and it didn't leave because it wanted to. And yes, Sardis Lake is still a recreation area today. Boats, campsites, anglers, the whole thing. But that's what makes Sardis such a strange ghost town story. The place is busy now, but the past is literally under the surface. Sometimes you can reach the cemetery island by a narrow access way depending on conditions and water levels. Other times it feels like it's just floating out there, separated from everything, like the lake is keeping it at arm's length. Sardis didn't become a ghost town because people stopped caring. It became a ghost town because the water was planned. And the next town on our list, that one wasn't drowned by a lake. It was taken out by the thing no town can negotiate with. Nature coming in fast and dirty. Number 4, Burke City, Okfuskee County. Burke City is one of the strangest kinds of ghost towns, because if you show up looking for ruins, you'll probably think you're in the wrong place. There's no empty main street, no collapsing storefronts, no welcome sign leaning in the weeds. The punchline is brutal. Burke City doesn't look abandoned. It looks erased. Back around the early 1900s, Burke City was planted on the south bank of the Canadian River, not far from where Barden is today. It wasn't some fancy booming town with theaters and hotels. It was more like a working checkpoint, a practical little place people depended on. Local history talks about a ferry crossing here, one of those river ferries that mattered before bridges were everywhere. Farmers in the area used Burke City as a meeting spot, the kind of place where you'd load up supplies, trade news, maybe grab what you needed from a general store, and then head back out. It was small-town life in its purest form, not glamorous but useful, and it all happened fast. Depending on the source, Burke City's window as a town was incredibly short, around 1901 to roughly 1903, 2 years. That's barely enough time to build habits, let alone a legacy. The town itself is often linked back to a general store connected to the McGee brothers and a man named John Burke, the name that stuck to the spot like a label on a crate. Then the river did what rivers do. The same water that made a ferry business possible also made the whole town a gamble. Oklahoma historical accounts point to flooding on the North Canadian/Canadian River as the reason Burke City was abandoned in the early 1900s. And the other local summaries don't even sugarcoat it. It flooded and basically nothing remained. That's what makes Burke City feel so unsettling. Most ghost towns give you something to hold on to, an old church, a jail, a building you can point at and say, that's where life used to be. A Burke City gives you a stretch of riverbank and a story. If you stand there today, the modern world doesn't help you. There's no clear outline saying, here was the store, here was the ferry, here was the gathering spot. It's just land, water, and the quiet thought that people once depended on this exact place for everyday survival. And then one season of water decided the town wasn't allowed to exist anymore. Burke City lived because of the river. Burke City died because of the river, and if that feels like nature being ruthless, the next ghost town on our list is a different kind of ruthless, because it wasn't water that erased it. It was the sky. Number 3, Eddy, K County. Some ghost towns die slowly. Stores close, people move, the lights go out one by one. Eddy didn't get that kind of ending. Eddy is the kind of place that feels like it died, then tried to come back and got knocked down again and again. If you're looking at a map, Eddy sits in K County, about 7 miles southwest of Blackwell. Today, it's basically just a name that locals recognize, not a town you visit the way you'd visit a historic district. But a little over a century ago, this was a real community with a real rhythm. It actually started under a different name, Osborne, and then on January 3rd, 1901, it was renamed Eddy. The name wasn't random. It was tied to the railroad world, named for Eddy Beckham, the son of a railroad developer. That detail matters because it tells you what Eddy was supposed to be. One of those small Oklahoma towns built around movement, tracks, freight, people passing through, the promise that being connected meant you'd survive. And for a while, it did. Then came the part nobody can plan for. Oklahoma historical accounts point to the same brutal pattern. Eddy was hit by multiple fires and multiple tornadoes. Not one disaster. A string of them. It's hard to even imagine what that feels like. Building a life, watching it burn, rebuilding, then watching the sky twist the whole thing apart. One local style account paints a picture that sticks with you. Eddy was once big enough to have several churches, enough that Sundays would have felt busy, full of people, full of routine. Then a fire wiped the town out. Folks put it back together. And later, a tornado came through and basically finished the job. Whether every detail is perfectly documented or not, the shape of the story is clear. Eddy didn't just decline. It got physically erased over and over until the community finally couldn't justify starting from scratch again. That's what makes Eddy different from the last few towns on this list. Texola faded, Skullyville got bypassed, Parkersburg moved, Keokuk Falls got shut down by the law, Pine Valley got dismantled, Sardis got drowned on purpose, Burke City got washed away. Eddy is the one where the enemy was the weather and the timing. Fire and wind repeating until the town's luck ran out. And here's the eerie part. When a place disappears like that, it doesn't leave behind the cool ruins people expect. Postcard buildings, no neat row of shells, just quiet land, scattered traces, and maybe a nearby cemetery that reminds you this was never a myth. People loved here, worked here, went to church here, and then the town was gone. And if you think Eddy's ending is harsh, the next town on our list is harsher in a different way because it wasn't nature that emptied it. It was a decision made by people. Number 2, Depew, Creek County. Depew is a weird kind of ghost town because it's not fully dead. People still live here, kids still go to school here. you can still swing by the post office. But the part that feels haunted is the part that used to matter most, the old downtown strip that once had Route 66 running right through it. And here's the detail that makes Depew sting. It was basically the first town Route 66 ever ghosted. Back in 1926, when Route 66 was first laid out, Depew's main street was on the route. That's a big deal for a small town. That's traffic. That's travelers stopping for food, gas, a bed, a bottle of aspirin, whatever they needed. For a minute, Depew looked like it was going to be one of those little places that rode the highway into a better future. And then, almost immediately, it got bypassed. Around 1928, the road was rerouted and the stream of cars that should have fed the town started slipping past it. 2 years. That's all Depew got as a main route town. Imagine getting a golden ticket, framing it on the wall, and then someone comes back and says, "Actually, never mind." Now rewind a little further. Depew started like a lot of Oklahoma towns. Railroad influence, farming, cotton business. The early 1900s had it growing into a real service town. Then oil activity in the region turned up the volume. Like a lot of places, the boom years made everything feel permanent. By 1930, Depew hit a population peak of about 1,126 people. That's not huge, but it's a real downtown. Real shops, real routines, real Saturday mornings. Then the Flore dropped out. The Great Depression hit, the oil-driven energy cooled, and with Route 66 no longer feeding the main street, Depew's downtown started to look like a photo that stopped developing. The buildings stayed, the street stayed, but the everyday why faded. That's what makes Depew so good for this countdown. You can drive in today and it feels normal at first. The town is small, around a few hundred residents now, but it's still a town. Yet when you roll along Main Street, you can feel the leftover shape of the Route 66 era. Brick storefronts, old bones of businesses, that classic small town layout where you can almost hear the echo of tires on 1920s concrete. And if you're filming, that's the shot. A living place with a dead-looking downtown. The kind of quiet that isn't abandoned wilderness. Quiet. It's this used to be busy and now it's not quiet. Depew didn't vanish in a firestorm or get drowned under a lake. It got left behind by the road, right at the moment it thought it had finally been picked. And if that feels cruel, wait until you hear number one, because the next town didn't just get bypassed, it got emptied on purpose. Number one, Picher, Ottawa County. If you want a number one that doesn't just feel like a ghost town, but feels like a warning sign, this is it, because Picher didn't fade away. It didn't get bypassed. It didn't run out of business. Picher got bought out. Drive into the area and the first thing that messes with your head are the white hills. At a glance, they look like snowdrifts or sand dunes, but they're neither. They're chat piles. Mountains of mining waste left over from a century of digging up lead and zinc in the tri-state mining district. And the scary part is that pretty white stuff can carry heavy metals. State environmental warnings have literally told people to avoid contact with it. And then there's Tar Creek itself, the name that sounds harmless until you learn it's tied to one of the most infamous Superfund cleanups in the country. This whole area was placed on the national priorities list back in 1983. The mining brought jobs and money, sure. In the early 1900s, this region helped fuel industry and even wartime demand. But it also left behind something you can't just bulldoze and forget. Contaminated soil, polluted water, and ground that isn't always stable because of old mine tunnels underneath. That's the part most ghost towns don't have. In Picher, it wasn't just that people left. It's that staying became a risk. Over time, the health concerns piled up, especially worries about lead exposure. Then there's subsidence, the slow, ugly possibility that the ground can give way because of what's been hollowed out below. And when a place becomes known for being dangerous to live on, the story changes from abandoned town to forced exit. That's why Picher's ending is so different. The government didn't just watch it decline, buyouts and relocations happened. And in 2009, Picher was officially disincorporated, basically erased as a functioning city. After that, more and more structures came down, not because they collapsed, but because the place was being shut down. And if you want one moment that feels like the universe underlining the message, a powerful tornado hit in 2008 and tore through the town. By then, Picher was already on borrowed time. That storm didn't create the problem, but it made the ending feel unavoidable. So what is Picher today? It's a ghost town where the ghost isn't a legend, it's the residue of an industry that never really cleaned up after itself. The streets are quiet, the buildings are gone or disappearing, and those white chat piles still sit there like a landscape that shouldn't exist. And here's the part that sticks with you. Most ghost towns feel like history. Picher feels like something that could happen again, anywhere a boom is allowed to leave a poison behind. After 10 stops across Oklahoma, the scary part isn't just that these towns are empty, it's how fast a place can disappear when one thing changes. A road gets rerouted, a law flips, a river rises, a company packs up, or the ground itself becomes unsafe. Yeah, and each town was a reminder that community isn't just buildings. It's jobs, routines, and the fragile reasons people stay. Now I'm curious about you. Which town hit you the hardest and why? Was it the one that moved, the one that vanished underwater, or the one that had to be bought out and shut down? Drop your pick in the comments. And if you know a forgotten Oklahoma town we should cover next, tell me the name and what makes it unforgettable. If you enjoyed this kind of real history mystery, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next countdown.